Hello, my friends. Kind of going to give an update on everything that I've seen over the last couple weeks since last time I put out a video, and I described how I saw God using specific people to show the internals of certain things that are happening within the nations. Um, Basically, who the man is behind the curtains, what the ruling classes, the elites of people, um, actually hide behind, and what they actually do in the darkness. God is bringing all that out to the forefront, and in order to do that, he has to use certain people. And the people that he has to use to perform this task has to be people who know, has to be people from within that. I said how he was going to use Trump to expose the governments, and he already did that in 2016. He was going to use Musk to expose the corporate side of things, the social media side of things, and he's been doing that also. And he was going to use Kanye to expose the religious sides of things. And we see this happening full form. Now, I was given kind of something like a parable yesterday, and how it was described to me was like the scales of God, how it is something like a pendulum that comes in the world. And this pendulum, the prophets also described it like this, and it's not me making up something new, it's me better understanding what, for instance, Enoch even spoke about in the book of Enoch, if you want to even go to a source that wasn't completely biblical, how the perspective of the world is, and how we are like rats in a cage that we can't see from a certain perspective until suddenly you have the eyes to see, and then you realize everything that you're living in is like a theater. You're like in a play. So I describe it using a pendulum. So it swings all the way to the left, and you can look at this like politically, culturally. We have the left and the right. You have the sheep and the goats. You have one side and another side of things. This is what Christ came to divide with a sword, cut it in half. He's showing you there is two sides of things. So this pendulum swings all the way to the left. It reaches its peak. It begins then to head back towards the middle. Then it swings right. Then it reaches all the way to the right. And then it begins to head back toward the middle. And this is the law of the world itself. Imagine a pendulum swinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When the left pulls too much, it begins to come back to the right. When the right pulls too much, it begins to come back to the left. And this is the cycle of people within a culture. They make laws that go too far one side, and then laws come that go too far the other side in order to make things come back in the middle. And that middle ground is like the Goldilocks situation. It's like we were living in the 90s, for instance. That was more like a Goldilocks time. It was the middle of things where you could get along doing most anything. And it wasn't the situation that we see today where the world is pulled far to the left. So this is the law of the world itself, the cycle of things. All people you can look at are like sheep who ride on this pendulum. And on one side of the pendulum is a pack of wolves. And then on the other side of the pendulum is another pack of wolves. And the wolves keep pushing the sheep on the pendulum, going back and forth, pushing and pulling. Now, anytime someone comes along who is not riding the pendulum like the rest of the sheep on the pendulum, the other sheep who are riding the pendulum, they begin to turn more into wolves themselves, and they devour that sheep who has saw that he was riding on a pendulum being pushed and pulled, and tried to step out of it, and tried to bring other people with him. In other words, it's like Jesus said, there are greener pastures with his Father. Anyone who sees and recognizes this knows that to be true. To be with God is like going to a pasture that is green, as opposed to the pasture that you were on. You have the sheep on the pendulum, all the sheep, and you have the wolves on each side, and they're pushing the sheep back and forth, but the sheep just keep going along on the pendulum because they can't stop. But once a sheep jumps off of that pendulum, then suddenly the rest of the sheep that are on the pendulum are no longer sheep to that sheep who left the pendulum. They then turn into a pack of wolves themselves, just like I've spoken on repeatedly about the churches in this age. As soon as somebody comes along who sees a greener pasture and speaks truth to these churches that are lost in their doctrine of falseness, all of those sheep that are in that flock suddenly turn against that one sheep who stood out from amongst them. They slander that sheep. They will destroy that sheep, and they will speak that sheep ultimately from speaking. And then ultimately they will kill that sheep. Just as what happened to Jesus, this will also happen to the two witnesses. And one cannot live in this world unless they swing happily on this pendulum, because the world is a false world created in the image of Satan. We had Jesus come, who is the light of the world, the only light that the world has ever known. And Jesus, when he came into that world, offered to give that light for many. Thus I can see the light, but the world cannot see this light at all if it does not have Christ. Thus it's just like the sheep on the pendulum. So when one makes a decision to no longer swing on that pendulum, the end result of this, it's something I believe that you'll see with Kanye. And if you really want to look into things and kind of the things that Kanye was speaking about, he was, of course, on the Alex Jones show last night. It became this big thing. And basically today, whenever I listen to the gossipers speaking about that interview, they are praising Alex Jones. Can you imagine that? The man who basically everybody condemned now suddenly is praising Alex Jones because it's Kanye that has gone so crazy. Even Alex Jones looks good. And that tells you something right there in itself. That the one who is truly trying to get people to see something differently, that's the one who all the sheep then turn into the wolves and begin to attack. And that's happening right now with Kanye. And Kanye very well could be a false prophet. He could be the one that is the false prophet in the end. I don't know. But what I know is what is happening right now, and I am able, because of God, to rightly divide one thing from the next. And this is exactly what I see happening. Now, if you want to go into what Kanye actually speaks about, quite frequently, it's about the Jews, those who call themselves Jews. And what he says about these Zionist Jews, as they call themselves, and there's plenty of Zionist Christians, I speak about them all the time with what they actually do, how they've sold their birthright to children of Satan. What he says about them, if you listen to him speak, is that it's not the Jews. It's the people who are behind the Jews. And who does he say is actually behind the Jews? Satan. He actually said in that interview, if you listen to him, he had mentioned that the Jews are deceived by Satan, and that it's Satan who acts through these Jews. He's saying the same thing that your Bible is, but the Zionist Christians who've sold their birthright to the Jews, they cannot and will not accept this, and they will condemn him for these things. They will condemn him for speaking what Revelation 3 verse 9 says in the Bible. See, there are some who belong to Satan. They say they are Jews, but they are not. They are liars. See, I will make them come to you and get down at your feet. Jesus calls them a synagogue of Satan in Revelation 3:9 on different translations. But this is to the Church of Philadelphia. And what is the Church of Philadelphia? It is the end-time salvation church, meaning that when the end comes, the Church of Philadelphia is the only one who has the key to open the door. The next church, the Laodicea church, they don't have the keys to open the door. But the Church of Philadelphia does. See, you do not have much power, but you have obeyed my word. You have not turned against me, so I have given you an open door that no man can shut. What is the door that Jesus is speaking of? The door to the ark. The same door that the bridegroom goes in with the bridesmaids, with the bride. He's talking about a door that can't be shut. It's the door to the ark, the door to the rapture, the people that leave this place before the great tribulations. That's the open door, and the only people he gives that to is the Church of Philadelphia. So whenever we're talking about Revelation 3:9 in context of a time frame, you see it's at the end. It's right now. And Kanye said nothing that isn't written in Revelation 3:9, that it's Satan that acts behind the Jews, which is what I also say, because it's right here in Revelation 3:9. I didn't say it. God said it. And they will know that I have loved you, and I will keep you from the time of trouble, because I understand that God has given me vision to see the greener pasture and to go to it, to jump off of that pendulum. But for saying this, all the rest of the sheep will don their wolves' clothing and attack me for it, just as the whole world is now attacking him for it, because he has said what is true, and not by his or my own standards, by God's own standards, because it's his own words. And that time of the end, where the Jews are known as the synagogue of Satan, it's at the time of the rapture, the open door, which is now. It's happening. It's imminently coming. We're not going to have to wait for this for another generation. This generation who've seen all of these things will not pass away until all things be fulfilled. The generation that began with Satan giving birth to the harlot in 1948. The physical Israel that leads is the stumble block that leads even the very elect astray, because they look at it and call it holy instead of looking at New Jerusalem, which has not come down from heaven yet. This is why Jesus says, hold on to what you have so that no one can take your crown, because the whole world is going to try to lead you away from seeing what I am speaking of right now. The whole world of sheep swinging on a pendulum that turn into wolves, they do not want you to listen to this, because you will then begin to see it just as God has shown it to me and to others. And then you will leave the pendulum. And Satan cannot have a divided kingdom. When people leave the pendulum, it is dividing his kingdom. Thus it falls. You go into the church of Laodicea. This is the one who is God basically saying that you are neither hot nor cold. You're just swinging back and forth on the pendulum, so I'm going to spit you out because you don't actually know me. You're just swinging back and forth on the pendulum, going with whatever the wolves are telling you to do, and you don't jump off the pendulum. That's the church of Laodicea. So then we go further into this, and we get into the Elon Musk thing, where he has now these brain chips, the neural chips that he's going to begin putting in humans 6 months from now, they said. And I'm sure it's already happened. Anytime that you get that far in technology, they test it before they become public with it. So it's already happened. You're just not going to know about it. But he, of course, owns Twitter now. And I said that God would use Elon, or Satan would use Elon. One way or the next, he's being used for a biblical purpose. Whether he is the Antichrist or the false prophet himself, God uses all things for the benefit of those who love him, including all these people that you think are minions of Satan. Even if they are, God still uses them for your benefit, because you must learn good from evil. That is your purpose for being here. That was the fall itself. Until you know good from evil, be able to separate one thing from the next. You cannot ascend back to heaven where God is. We must learn good from evil, because that was the original curse on us. That's why we have evil in the world, to learn it, because we chose it. We fell. We didn't want what God was willing to give. We wanted it all, just like Satan wanted it all. But Satan didn't have a way back out of this. We did through Christ. We can go back to understanding where we were in the beginning was better than this. But we will go back with knowledge of good and evil. We will defeat Satan. We will defeat the curse. We will know good from evil. But we will also know our Father, which is different than what happened then. But anyway, back into the whole Elon and Kanye thing. So Elon blocks Kanye now from Twitter. And this, all the gossipers out there talking about it. And why does he ban him? For incitement of violence. And what was incitement of violence? Apparently Kanye posted an image of the Star of David mixed with a swastika. Okay, an image I wouldn't post, an image not many people would post, I'm guessing, because who was even thinking about that? Who cares of that? But that's an incitement to violence. So we're now saying that an image, that an artwork, or anything that somebody makes, if that is given as an excuse to incite someone for violence, what has Elon done? He has taken the man's speech away, his voice. And he's blaming his voice for causing somebody else to be violent. And I'm sorry, but if you can't look at an image, any image, and refrain from being violent yourself, it's not the image fault. It's your own fault. It's your lack of self-control. It is your godless nature, your Satan nature that has overcome you. It's not the image's fault. It's yours. But that's the reason that he's now banned from this Twitter. So this brings me into another point. And we're going to talk about the melting points of America, because another thing that Kanye said was that he loved Hitler, and that Hitler did a lot of good things too, and that we should be able to speak of that. He wasn't saying anything that isn't true from a certain point of view. Let me give you a couple examples of this. Was the space program good? You know that came from Werner von Braun, who created the Atlas rockets. He was a German Nazi scientist, head rocket scientist of German. Stealth aircraft came from Germany. Highways came from Germany. Most of the medical procedures, different medicines that we have developed into modern technology began in Germany and in Japan. These things that we call good came from something that we call evil. So both things cannot be true at the same time. What it means is that you have to be able to differentiate what was good and what wasn't good. What Hitler did to disabled people, the Jews, everything else along those lines, that was done in evil. But the idea of that, his idea to bring Germany as a one-person nation, that was biblical. That was good. He just did it using evil, which amounts for evil. But for us to sit today and not be able to say that things that came out of Nazi Germany was good, you only do that because you've been trained since the cradle to believe this person is bad no matter what, and that person is good no matter what. And that is not human fallen nature. People are both good and bad with their qualities. People are sinners, continuously evil in their hearts. Anything that good that comes from them is done by account of being in the image of God. It's not themselves that creates good. It's the image of God still deeply hidden within them that makes the good. And you should be able to say, well, this was good and this was bad. That was his main point on it. And that even for Hitler, it's Jesus Christ that could save even him. And the first example of this was Paul, who wrote your Bible, a good portion of the New Testament. Paul was basically Hitler to the Jews. God saved Paul. His point is that in Christ all can be saved, because what you do here is different once you are saved. You die of what you were and you become something new. And I have no idea what happened to Hitler. I don't care what happened to Hitler, but I'm talking about the point that Kanye made, and that people today will sit and condemn, even though he has said something that was biblical. So we talk about the melting pot of America, and I've explained this before. The melting pot is at the heart of the American immigration system. The melting pot comes from the idea that all of the cultural differences in the United States meld together as if they were metals being melted down to become a stronger alloy. This is not a biblical passage. This is what they call the melting pot. This is your dictionary definition of the melting pot of America. So let me show you what God says about that melting pot. And I go to Daniel. As the toes of the feet were made of part iron and part clay, so some of the nation will be strong and part of it will be weak. As you saw the iron mixed with the clay, they will try to join with one another, but they will not stay together any more than iron mixes with clay. This is in the end times. This is that end times nation that Daniel saw of the king. This is right now. We are that nation, half made of iron, half made of clay, because we're a melting pot of a whole bunch of different peoples. What is the whole woke culture? Tolerance, acceptance, but only tolerance and acceptance of a certain point of view, not of another point of view. If you're of another point of view, you are Hitler, you are a Nazi. White people are bad. Black people rule the world. You can't criticize a Jew. That's anti-Semitic. Homosexuals and lesbians, they need special privilege because of the colonization of the white people that they did that to them. They have white privilege and they don't. Yet every law that I can pull up shows you how they discriminate against me as a white man, and they privilege those who are lesbians and homosexuals and different races. All of these things, by law, I'm discriminated against, and they're put up on a pedestal. But what they say is the opposite, because they are liars and they have no truth in them, and they love the lie more than the truth. So God hands them over to this. So we know that biblically speaking, God hates mixtures. He does not want any kind of a mixture. Like the yeast in the bread, once a little bit of yeast mixes in, the whole batch is ruined, because yeast mixes throughout the whole batch. You want to look up some biblical comments of mixtures. And that you saw the iron mixed with common clay. They will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. A mixed multitude also went up with them, along with the flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. This is talking about the fallen ones. For they have taken some of their daughters as wives for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy race has intermingled with the peoples of the land. Indeed, the hands of the princes and the rulers has been foremost in this unfaithfulness. Ephraim mixes himself with the nations. Ephraim has become a cake not turned. But they mingled with the nations and learned their practices. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? Everything, when you're talking about God's perspective of mixing things, God calls it evil, because it brings evil forth. What Germany attempted to do the wrong way, by means of evil themselves, was create a one racial superior race as they saw it. Biblically speaking, that's what Israel was back in the day. Of the prophets, that was Israel. It was a race to be ascended above other races, to be the light of the world. That's what the church today was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a people who were of one mind, of one doctrine, of one body. Because anytime you do any sort of mixing at all, people, human, fallen nature is tribal. It will cause the iniquity and lawlessness that we deal with today in our modern society. It is like clay trying to mix with iron. It does not happen. It will not take. No matter what the people try to say, we're doing it in diversity is the greatest strength. It's because it's the greatest weakness. But the lie you've been told your whole life living in a Western nation especially is that that is the greatest strength. And it's because Satan is behind all of these teachings. Just like Kanye says, behind the Jews is Satan. Just like Revelation 3:9 says, a synagogue of Satan. Just like your culture shows you all these elite people telling you this is good, this is bad, it's because Satan is behind all of it. He is the one who swings the pendulum. And that pendulum is protected by wolves on both sides, who then makes the sheep who ride the pendulum into wolves themselves. As soon as one of the sheep steps out from that world of Satan, this false world that he has created for us to live in, whoever that sheep is the one who gets put to death. Whoever that sheep is the one who gets condemned and slandered and lied about, and false witness borne against him. That sheep is the one who has known God more than any of those sheep that swing on the pendulum. And that is why Jesus said, broad is the path that leads to destruction, narrow is the path that leads to life, few find it. It is because of that exact concept. But today you'll hear nothing but people condemning all of these things, which biblically God calls good. And it's because people cannot rightly divide one thing from the next. They cannot look at Nazi Germany, for instance, and say that anything about it was good, or else their entire doctrine of that is evil, this is good on a world scale is shattered. Because If they admit that Germany did something good, that the Nazis did something good for humanity in the 40s, then they would have to admit their entire worldview of good person, bad person is completely wrong. And they cannot do that because they do not have the Spirit of God within them to be able to rightly divide that all humans are evil, no matter what, unless they be born again and know the truth. All people born of mother in this world are evil and wicked and continuously wicked. If it were not for the image of God within them, everything in this world would have already been destroyed a long time ago from its inception with Satan. But this is what the sheep who ride on the pendulum cannot allow you to see and recognize. Because if they allow you to see and recognize this, then their doctrine also becomes invalid of their works and how good they are and how much God talks to them and how much they understand. All of that then is torn down, the same as the great statue of the king that Daniel spoke of. That is the church of Laodicea, who today will sit and condemn a man because he has said biblically something that their own God called true. They will all sit and condemn him for all of it. I don't know what happens in the future. I only know what happens right now. I mean, I obviously have understanding of events and things that are going to come, but not on this particular scale, because God has shielded from me exactly who it is who takes over. But let me share something else with you, with Elon Musk especially. We talked about the satellites, how he can bring fire in full view of the people so that they believe in his lies, like the false prophet does. He calls down fire from heaven like Elijah did from God. The false prophet calls it down on his own accord, meaning he has something up there that calls it down. Well, Elon has all this stuff in outer space. Now think about this also. You have the Neuralink transmitters that are going to go in people's brains. These neural links by themselves will be too far about. They need to connect to the internet, and they need this and they need that in order to really take over and form an ant colony of people that no longer have God in them, because they've given themselves over to a technology, a false God, something else. They've completely given themselves over to it. There must be some kind of network set up to accomplish this. You ever wonder why they force the COVID vaccines on people? Why it makes people magnetized? My thoughts, just initial thoughts, just holy cow, what if scenario. What if all of these shots injected into people are like some kind of a nano shot? Where you get that and suddenly you become part of the network when these neurotransmitters and all this other stuff starts to go live. And what does that remind you of? You shall not buy or sell lest you take the mark. All who take the mark will be destroyed. It sounds to me like they're setting up infrastructure to a new internet, and they're doing it hidden so that you cannot see the truth of it until it's too late. I don't know that for certain, but that is something that has crossed my mind this morning of what really is behind the curtain to the actions that you see Satan taking on in the world. So that's basically what I wanted to speak about, how people will call what is good evil and call what is evil good. And they do it without even recognizing it because they've been indoctrinated to believe this person good, this person bad, this country good, this country bad. Because none of them have the Spirit of God in them to be able to rightly divide one thing from the next and be able to separate good things from bad things. They just lump everything together as good or lump everything together as bad. And that is not what the world is. The world is mixed by design, by definition, because we fell into the hands of Satan. And Satan is a mixed kingdom, but held together by bondage. But as Jesus described, he is the way out of that bondage. He is the path to greener pastures. And without him, there is nothing. What is about to happen in this world, there is no escaping it. The heavens themselves will recede. There's no escaping what is coming upon this earth and this universe and this creation, other than having the key to that door to the ark that no man can close out. God bless.